Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel, Art on the Brain. I'm Kelly Drake, and today I'm going to show you how to tear watercolor paper so that you can have a deckled edge on all four sides. This is part of my Watercolor Basics class, which starts via Zoom Friday, January 8th. This will be 5 two-hour workshops on basics, covering everything from tearing and stretching paper to choosing the right colors, mixing color, using masking fluid and resist techniques, making sure you get all the basics you need to know, all your questions answered, and help you to get confident and comfortable with the materials so that hopefully you can enjoy painting with watercolors as much as I do. If you're interested in taking this class, please click on the link below. And now to talk about how to tear watercolor paper. If you're in my class, I would like you to take your large pieces of watercolor paper that you purchased, the 22 by 30-inch pieces of paper, and follow this video and tear them into smaller pieces for the class. The smaller pieces will be a lot easier to stretch and a lot easier to use for the exercises that we do in class. The reason that we tear watercolor paper instead of cutting it is because watercolor paper comes with this wonderful deckled edge that makes it look more handmade. And that's just a process of how they put the fibers together and make the paper. But when you cut the paper, you end up with a fine straight edge. And that is not what we want, especially if you end up with a nice painting that you would like to float in a frame without a mat. And so what we do is we tear our paper into smaller pieces so that we have that nice rough, more organic edge on all four sides. So starting out, you have a large piece of paper here and you need a large flat place to work on. So I'm using my dining room table. You can use another kind of table, a desk, or the floor even if it's nice and clean. Make sure your surface is very clean and free of debris. And then with these pieces of paper, take them and fold them lengthwise. And what I do is I match the edges very carefully, press down the center and the outsides just to get that nice straight edge, and then I start to carefully push down the paper so that I have it a straight fold, making sure that the edges are together the whole time. Now I run my fingernail against the edge on both sides to crease the paper. You want, once you get that fold correct and you have a nice straight line, you want to press down pretty hard with your finger and your fingernail and crease the edge of the paper. This will help you tear it in a straight line. Now get your watercolor brush, one that'll hold quite a bit of water, and a nice clean jar of water, and just run it along the edge of the paper where you've creased it and get that edge nice and damp. And now you're going to want to unfold the paper and fold it back the other way again and do the same thing on the other side. Now getting the watercolor paper damp like this will really help you tear that right down the line so that you don't have it go off of your crease when you're tearing it. So now lay the paper flat on your surface again and press down on one side with your left hand, or your right hand if you're left-handed, and hold that down flat while you tear. And tear slowly and carefully so that you make sure that it goes right down the line that you creased and wetted with your paintbrush. Now I go to the other side once I get to the middle, so it's just easier to tear when you're on the shorter side instead of tearing it all the way down. You can see how it works best for you. See what a nice clean tear that I have. I have two equal pieces of paper. And now with this sheet, which as I said is 22 inches by 30 inches, I have now about 11 inches on the short side. And so I want some nice rectangular pieces here. So I'm just going to go ahead with about 8.5 by 11. And that'll make a good size to work on for class. You can tear your sheets in any size that you want, really. It is nice to kind of figure it out ahead of time so that you know you're going to get the most number of sheets, of workable sheets, and the least amount of waste for your piece of paper. So now I have just a number 2 pencil. I'm going to measure 8.5 inches, and I'm just going to make a light mark on the top and the bottom of the sheet at 8.5 inches. I'm not going to mark off all 3 sheets yet because I want to fold it and tear it first and then mark the next sheet. It'll change a little bit as you tear. So now the same technique as I used with the larger sheet. I'm just going to match up the sides so it's nice and straight. Make a crease on the outsides and the center, keeping that lined up the whole time. Use my thumb to just make a slight crease in the center. And once I have the center and the outsides creased, then I just continue that line outward. Now I'm going to use my thumb or my fingernail to strengthen that crease. Again, fold it over to the other side and do the same. Get my brush wet with nice clean water and wet the crease on both sides. Once that's wet, it's ready to tear. And this will be easier to tear than the longer sheet. Once you get it to smaller sheets like that, it should be easier to tear. So just get it started, press down with your offhand, and tear very slowly and carefully until you get the whole sheet off. Now you have your first sheet. And as I said, this will be about 8.5 by 11, which will fit on your board that you have prepared for class, which will fit anything up to 9 by 12. So now I'll mark the next 8.5 by 11 sheet. And you can mark just the outsides of the paper. You can also mark one mark on the center if you want to, just to get that middle crease right in the right spot. And as you fold here, you can see right where you've marked, and just be careful to hit that mark when you crease it. And this is just about practice and about just taking it slow and trying to be as accurate as you can. Since we're tearing, it's not going to be absolutely perfect as if you lined it up and cut it with a straight edge and an X-Acto knife, but that's part of the charm of the torn paper. You'll have a soft edge all the way around. And even if you decide later on to mat it and frame it, it's okay to have that soft edge. It's not going to hurt anything. And what's nice is if you do like the soft edge, then it's there for you all the way around and you can frame it that way. This is also a nice way to cut to tear watercolor paper and make greeting cards. So I'm going to start from the other side and tear it just as I've torn those other sheets before. And I have my second sheet. Now for my third sheet, you'll notice when I mark the 8.5 by 11, I mark the 8.5 inches here, I'll have a piece on the end that's left over. And this is something I like to do, is have a strip of the paper that I'm using left over so that I can use it as a sample sheet to test colors and textures on. So that when I'm working on a painting, I have a place to test those colors and textures and color mixtures so that I can see how strong the color is and whether I like the color or not, whether it needs a little something different. Um, and this is a great place to test your paint, just so that you know when you put it on your finished work that it's going to look the way you want it. So same thing here, folding it over again, wetting the edge all the way across. And now starting the tear and pressing down to hold that nice clean edge as I tear. And that's your third sheet. So when you're completely done with these 3 sheets, you can tear the other half of your paper, or you can leave that for later in case you'd like to tear it into 2 larger sheets. This is your sample sheet. What I like to do is to tear it into a few separate little sheets so that I have enough for each painting that I'm going to do. So I have 3 sheets of 8.5 by 11 paper, and now I'm going to tear this last little sample sheet into 3 pieces so that I have 3 sample pieces to use when I go to paint those other sheets of paper. I'm going to have, the way I'm doing it here, I just folded in half, so I'm going to have 1 larger sample sheet and 2 smaller ones. You can tear these in thirds if you want to. You can do whatever you want with these, but it's just kind of nice to have a few different sheets to use with the 8.5 by 11s that we're going to use for the finished paintings. And when I paint, I do like to have sample sheets of watercolor paper, but also some scrap paper, which just can be printer paper or whatever you have around to test colors on. The watercolor paper is nice because you can see exactly what it's going to do on the paper that you're painting on. So that's it for now on how to tear watercolor paper. I look forward to seeing you in my class January 8th, or if you are not in my class, thank you so much for watching this video. And now don't forget to subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this, and stop by and check out my webpage, my Facebook page, or take a look at my Instagram account if you'd like to learn more about me, my art, and my children's book illustrations.